Diabloceratops has one of the coolest looking horns I know, as well as one of the coolest names. As you might guess, it means devil horn face, from the Spanish diablo, meaning devil, the Greek keras, meaning horn, and ops, meaning face. Unlike many pathetic discoveries, Diabloceratops has good fragments, with the entire left side of the skull, including the midline, clearly indicating the long epiparietals that give rise to its name. The rest of the body is generally modeled after typical centrosaurines. As cool as it is actually a small Ceratopsian, being estimated to be 4.5 meters or 14.8 feet long. This model is approximately 12.5 centimeters or 4.9 inches, making the scale 1:36. And here's the closest Wonder Artistic Models humanoid I have to show you. The two color variants are the yellow and the blue. Just on first impressions, you'll see the whole thing is beautifully textured, even at the small size, with my almond for an idea of size. The coloration is very nice, and although still broadly earth-toned, I like that it's generally more yellow than brown, and these mottos are actually a lot more subtly faded than we saw in the release images. And as for the blue, the main color is actually more a kind of purple, which really goes well with the blue in the frill. The pose is a very lively, loping one, and as with their other offerings, looks very dynamic from a variety of angles. So let's take a closer look at first the yellow. Now here in the head, the little texture details are very obvious. Haolonggood has really maintained very high standards. The deep skull is nicely captured. You see these rings of tiny scales around the eyes. In the rostral area, and wrinkling across the narial. The line of the mouth is very natural looking, and the beak also looks natural. You have a nice fade going from the beak into the skin. Then here, a darker red-brown in the top. The characteristic Diabloceratops horns look nicely keratinized. You'll doubtless get a bit of warping out of the box, which you can get rid of easily. But given the asymmetry we've seen in fossils, I'm okay if they aren't perfectly symmetrical. The frill has a faint blue-green infused into it, and it's not too ostentatious. And it's a nice fade into the yellow. And there's a nice cross band of it into the squamosal here. The textures are really pleasing to look at, and nothing too ornate. Here you have the brow horns, with an almost purple-black in the base, fading up into an orange, really looking like something that might exist in nature. And moving down, the body is also highly detailed. In fact, in the body, the general basement scales, the peppering of little scutes on the sides, and even the dorsal osteoderms, plus these very fine wrinkles across, themselves crossed here by what might be superficial vessels. A smorgasbord of detail that actually makes the body look even more intricate than the head, especially in this yellow one. You can see here these mottles that fade very nicely into the yellow of the skin. The overall pattern is nice and don't quite give me the same boring stripe impression we've seen countless times. Here are some fainter ones. Detail down the hind limbs is no less exquisite, just like the rest of the body. You see that detail from shoulder girdle down. Again, let me remind you of the size with this almond. The anatomy of the Ceratopsian manus is wonderfully captured, but here, I accidentally painted these ones with claws, but easily painted over if you so wish. The relief of each surface is elevated by having this mix of minute scales, and likewise in the feet, then down the tail. And now the blue version. Of course, it's the same sculpt, and only the colors differ. In the head here, look at how a nice blend of reddish, brownish, bluish, purplish, and even the yellowish colors makes for a pleasing color palette. And up in the frill, the blue is a natural fit with the purple. Once again, with a spot of blue in the squamosal here. There's nothing garish about this, and blue like this I can actually believe in. The body is primarily a purple, which is quite a rare color in models. I think these black markings and mottles segue very nicely with the darker purple. The underside is that base yellow, a nice contrast of cool and warm color. Again down the shoulder, the arm, you can see there's a very nice balance of colors in the purple here. With the reddish-brown hands, and feet. The yellow in the middle, holding everything together, really makes for a balanced composition. Much has been made of the nose and brow horns of ceratopsians. From the early days of Triceratops with its two supraorbitals and Monoclonius with its impressive nose horn, ossifications on the frill edge seem to play just a small ornamental role. Except for Styracosaurus, there really didn't seem to be many worth talking about. Now that's changed in recent years. So today, let's talk a bit about frills and epiossifications. In past videos, I've used some terms which I apologize for not taking time to explain. So I thought some terminology would be useful to put us on the same page. Different papers have introduced different terms. As a reference, I'll use those mentioned in the Loewen et al. Paper on Lokiceratops, published just last week. As always, correct me if you think I've made any errors, and if I have, they'll go right at the top of my description boxes below. The Ceratopsian frill from the outside looks like one solid piece, but comprises of two paired bones. You have the parietal here, and the squamosal. Now these are tightly sutured in mature animals. It's similar to our own skulls, which start out as distinct cranial bones separated by fontanelles that eventually ossify and fuse them together. With regards to the frill, useful terms you'll need to know are the midline parietal bar, which is this central unpaired element, then the paired lateral parietal bars, and the midline or median embayment. Epiossifications are distinct bones that line the edges of the frill. These tend to fuse and blend into the frill with maturity. Epiossifications have by and large replaced the outdated epoccipitals. I'm still trying to change the habit, but I'm so used to saying it over a couple of decades, so it still slips out. Now briefly, the naming convention works like this. Epiossifications associated with the parietals are termed epiparietals. These are numbered from the medial to lateral as EP1, 2, 3, and however many there are. You might also see just P1, P2, and so on. Sometimes, in the midline, where the left and right parietals contact, you might have a midline epiparietal. This is numbered as EP0 or P0. Epiossifications lining the squamosals are termed episquamosals. From posterior to anterior, there'll be ES1, ES2, and so on. Or you might also see S1, S2, etc. Now, where the parietal meets the squamosal, there might be an epiossification at the suture. Now, this is the epiparietosquamosal, or the EPS. I should note that asymmetry is known, so that an animal may have a different number of epiparietals or episquamosals on one side, or even an EPS on one side, but not the other. In the past, except for the obvious example of Styracosaurus, epiossifications might have been given less importance, forming an ornamental frame to the main stars of the picture, the brow and nose horns. Indeed, this is still the case in some centrosaurines. For example, Lokiceratops has unremarkable epiossifications, and its unique selling point are the orientation of the brow horns. However, with the discovery of so many centrosaurines with a dizzying variety of frill ornaments, epiossifications become prominent stars themselves in many dinosaurs, with the brow or nose horns playing second fiddle. Unsurprisingly, they also play an important part in differential diagnosis. As an example of this, we need look no further than our Diabloceratops today. While you might have the more typical brow or nose horns, we're not even looking at them. Our eyes are irresistibly drawn to those outstanding devil horns, which are the P1s. According to Lunn, it's a sister taxon to Lokiceratops, which also has impressive P1s, though in a different orientation. While at first sight, Spinops look similar, these long frill horns aren't P1s, but the P2s. Its forward projecting P1s helps us distinguish between them, which brings me to another point. It's not just about the size and the shape, but also the position. For another example, look at these closely related taxa. We have Medusaceratops, Albertoceratops, and the latest Lokiceratops. Each has large laterally curved epiparietals. Size and shape certainly differ between Medusaceratops and Lokiceratops, with the asymmetrical and much larger P1s in Lokiceratops. In addition, Albertoceratops also differs because its large epiparietals are actually the EP1s, while in Medusaceratops they're actually the EP2s. You can just make out the very small EP1 here. As yet another side point, there's even some disagreement here, with some experts regarding Albertoceratops as missing the P1, for reasons a bit too technical to get into now, which means that these guys are essentially P2, just like in Medusaceratops. Another differentiating feature, often in combination with other traits, is the midline parietal embayment. For example, one of the differentia nominated between Lokiceratops and Medusaceratops is that in Lokiceratops, this embayment is medially restricted and narrow. Medusaceratopsis is, however, quite open and unrestricted. Another example is the Fowler and Fowler 2020 paper I've talked about before. It's the gradual closure of the medial embayment that's an important part of the postulated anagenetic lineage from Utaceratops to Øhlenschlæger. Now keep in mind, there's seldom just one autapomorphic feature that makes a dinosaur distinct, but often different permutations of anatomical features. We talk about the differences in frills and horns because they're the most exciting and most obvious to model collectors, with the general idea that the postcranial bow plan is so similar across centrosaurines. But it would be a mistake to think they're all we need. For example, a very strong differentiator between Lokiceratops and other centrosaurines is a distinct kink of the ischium, which we'll never see from the outside. So there's a complete picture to be considered. I've just shared a very bare-bones intro to the anatomy, and if you want to know more, you can do no better than to start with the Loewen et al. Paper on Lokiceratops, released just over a week ago. It's highly illustrated and highly detailed, an enjoyable read which will really get you up to speed on Ceratopsian anatomy in general. Let's get to the comparisons. The only mass-produced Diabloceratops I have is this wild safari Diabloceratops. Of course, it was from 11 years ago, but it's still a nice one to have. Safari Ceratopsian sculpts are generally very good, especially those by Doug Watson. And here's the 1/30th scale Dan's Dinosaurs Diabloceratops. This Sean Cooper sculpt was painted by Martin Garrett, and you see the kind of red I would have liked to see going with the Diablo idea. As for some other centrosaurines with long epiparietals, we have the sister taxon Lokiceratops from PNSO, with those forward curving P1s. You can see how distinct these almost broken looking P1s are. Here's the PNSO Spinops with its P2s. Noting that the P1s are here. Here's the Øhlenschlæger, one of the earlier ceratopsians I knew about with long epiparietals. Then the Styracosaurus, for many still the epitome of cool epiossifications. Now, some of Haolonggood's small ceratopsians. Here's the Chasmosaurine Cosmoceratops in 1 to 35. Also a 4.5 meter animal. This is a size that's about 1 to 35. Here's another Chasmosaurine, the Haolonggood Chasmosaurus. The poster child for ceratopsians, the Triceratops. This one is from PNSO. For a contemporaneous predator, here's the PNSO Lithronyx, which is sadly too big for 1 to 35. Finally, the PNSO Wilson T-Rex and the PNSO Cameron T-Rex. So that's it for the Haolonggood Diabloceratops. Haolonggood kicked off its comeback with Nasutoceratops, and it's been a journey to today's Diabloceratops. They've continued to improve and mature, and even their already good paint apps have improved. We're now quite a ways in the fulfillment of this promise, but for the ceratopsians, we're just beginning, and I can't wait to collect them all, especially the Øhlenschlæger. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video.